So it's April 2nd, 2025. We're interviewing today on the subject of fishing and the history of fishing here on Pine Island. My name is Jim Friedlander and I'm the interviewer. The person doing the recording is Steve Russell, and I'll let the interviewee give us your name.
Steve Poppell.
Steve Poppell.
Yep.
Great. Thanks a lot, Steve, for doing this. So, Steve, can you tell us a little bit about your history, how you ended up here on Pine Island, when that happened?
Well, I was born in Punta Gorda.
Okay.
First of four boys. And we were living in Boquilla at the time. And my first few years was growing up in Boquilla. I mean, you could run up and down the beach there. There was nobody fishing on the pier. You know, it was just a pier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What period are we talking about? What year?
Well, I was born in 48.
Okay.
Yep.
So this would be the early 50s?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Early 50s. And then my dad bought he ran a fish house down there.
In Boquilla?
One of the dealers, yeah.
Okay.
And while we were living there. And at one time we actually lived in the fish house. There was a separate, like, apartment. I can barely remember that, but I can remember Daddy putting us in a fish basket when we would misbehave and hang us over the water. It would make you feel like he was going to take you down there. Back then you didn't have electric lifts. You had, you know, your manual block and tackle. But anyways, that was a good life, and he bought a canal lot down here in Boquilla off Portobello for $800.
Amazing.
Of course, it was undeveloped,
Yeah.
but, you know. But then they decided we would move to the center because he could buy 5 acres up there for that. At the center, and that's where Mom's house is right now.
Right.
You know,
where she
so
lives.
he sold the canal lot for what he had in it and bought the property up there. And gradually he sold some of that off, and that's where Mom's house is right now.
So did you go to school here?
Oh yeah. I went to Pine Island Elementary. Wasn't open yet.
Right.
I went Pine Island Elementary when I got into the 6th grade. That's the year that it opened. And I got to spend about half a school year there, and then it was off to junior, senior high school.
Where was your school?
I went to J. Colin English. Up off Pine Island Road, up by Merchants Crossing in that area in there.
Oh, okay. So you had to bus over there.
Oh yeah, and it was a long bus ride. They didn't care about people on Pine Island. You were the last to be serviced. You know, it was a long bus ride. Even in high school, it was a long bus ride. They would you'd get on the bus and they'd go everywhere else, and then they'd come out to Boquilla, Pine Island. It was, and no air conditioning in those days. Those school buses were hot. Yeah.
When did they build when did they dig the canals?
For what?
Well, like you said, your father had a canal.
Well, before I knew anything about it, it was Knight Brothers and Knight affiliates. Robert Knight and some of his relatives and stuff actually dug the ones in Boquilla.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
and I don't remember those getting dug. They were already
here.
Yeah. Yep.
Where was your father's fish house?
Well, he worked for one of the fish dealers, and it sat on the water there in the back bay.
Oh, okay.
Of Boquilla. There were like 3 of them. There are 3 different fish dealers. We used to have 7 or 8 or 9 fish dealers out here on the island, and I mean the island was full of family-oriented fishermen. You know, a lot of them, and everybody knew everybody.
Yeah, I gather. Yeah.
Yep.
So how and when did you actually start fishing?
Well, my dad used to take us fishing with him a couple times in his boat. And then he would take me and my brother that's closest to my age. He would take us and turn us loose in the skiff, and we would go back and forth along the woods catching mullet while he would go out and catch trout or whatever, and then he'd come back and get us, you know. But my other brothers didn't pursue it that much. But me, I loved every minute of it. Even the mosquitoes. You can't imagine how bad the mosquitoes were then.
I can't imagine.
No, and we didn't have battery-powered lights. We had Coleman lanterns,
Yep.
you know, and they were hot because they were back there on the stern of the boat where you could see what you were doing. And your insect repellent was some stuff called 612.
Remember that?
It was so potent, it had to be in a glass container. They couldn't put it in a plastic bottle.
So were you doing this at night?
Mostly at night.
Mostly at night, yeah, because I heard you say you were using
Yeah.
lanterns. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, yeah. You had fishermen that liked the daytime to fish with, you know, mostly mullet, and you had the other fishermen that liked the nighttime, which I always preferred it. There was less traffic. There was you generally the competition wasn't there,
Yep.
and I just liked fishing at night a lot better.
Can you describe your fishing gear and your boat a little bit?
Back in those days, you usually, in the beginning, you were partners with somebody because you would generally have somebody that had an inboard and they towed skiffs with the net on it. And when you got to the area where you're going to fish, you anchored the inboard, what we called the launch, and then you pushed away into what we call the pole skiffs. And when you found the fish, then you put the ends of your nets together, and one guy went this way and the other guy went that, and you made a big circle, you know, and then you come inside that circle, and that's how you caught your fish.
And they were gill nets.
Yeah, they were gill nets, and you had multiple sizes so you could eliminate bycatch. Gill nets had very little bycatch because we always targeted a specific species or size of fish. So for mullet, we had to have like 5 different nets because as it went through the seasons, the fish changed, you know.
And they hung from floats? Is that the way they work?
Well, you had a lead line that held it on the bottom, and then the cork line held it up to the top.
It was used corks?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because
And then come the invention of what we call the kicker boat, where you had a motor up in the bow, an outboard.
I still see a few of those
Yeah.
around.
Oh yeah. And they started becoming popular, and things changed over to where you hardly saw anybody with a pole skiff anymore because you had a complete self-contained fishing boat. You know, you had your net back there. You didn't have to pole the boat. You had a outboard in the front, and you had your ice box in the middle, and you just got in the boat and went fishing.
Is that what you had?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you mostly were a net fisherman, right?
Yeah.
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 And then I got into shrimping a little bit, and I fished offshore just a little bit, just kind of phasing into it, you know. But
When did that start to happen?
that was before the net ban. It was whatever it took to keep things moving and to make a living.
Right. Right.
You know, I've even been known to go pour concrete. It's when the fishing was bad, I'd find something else to.
Yeah.
I built a lot of boats. I built a lot of kicker skiffs.
Oh, you did, yeah.
Yeah, we built a lot of wooden kicker skiffs, and then we built a one that we really liked, and we made a mold off of it and started building fiberglass skiffs.
Oh, really?
Right here under the house.
Oh, wow.
Yep, and we built 30 of those.
Are there some still around?
Yes, there are. Yeah.
Do you know where I could find one? I'd love to get a picture
Oh,
of one.
not offhand, because so many of the guys have scattered to the winds. I can't. I was thinking about that the other day. I don't know exactly who's got one right now.
I
just
see
don't
somebody
know.
buzzing around out here sometimes.
Yeah, there's several different ones.
But I don't know if it's yours.
Yep. And mine was in the smaller caliber, but we stayed busy at any rate.
Yeah.
Whatever it took. Sometimes I would be working down there fiberglass in a boat or something, and she would be helping me, and then I would get a call for a fire because I was a volunteer fireman. So it was, here's the roller, I'm gone, and she'd have to finish up. Yeah.
So, so when did you actually start fishing on your own?
On my own, right before I got out of high school.
Okay.
Yeah, in the
Already had it.
in the 11th grade.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
And you bought your nets?
I bought, yeah. Well, my dad let me borrow nets until I could buy a net, and I worked. There was a ranch up on Pine Island Road, and I worked there. I'd get off the bus and work there until I saved enough money to buy me a little kicker boat.
Uh-huh.
I saw one for sale and I bought it, and then that was it. That was no more playing cowboy. I became a fisherman then.
Was that the one that Robert worked at?
Could be. It was Gulf Coast Farms.
It was right where the Publix is now?
Across from it.
Oh, across from it.
Across
Okay,
the road.
Okay.
Yeah, across from that Publix and up the road all the way to across from where Bubba's Saloon is.
Yeah.
That was all Gulf Coast Farms.
Amazing.
And it was a cattle ranch and a gladiola farm.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what did a net cost back in those days?
Back in those days, about $1 a yard.
Okay. So,
Yeah. But what you would do is, as you wore one out, you could actually just cut all the webbing off of the ropes and reuse the ropes and the leads and the corks. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you just actually replace the webbing itself. When I first started fishing, most people were using nylon nets. Hence the reason for fishing at night, because they worked better at night. And then
why was that?
Well, the fish could see it in the daytime.
Right.
And then come the monofilament nets, and that was a game changer. Anybody could catch fish with a monofilament net. So you had a large amount of people that shifted over, started fishing in the daytime, and then we got an influx of fishermen. And we got an influx of fishermen that never had fished before, but they wanted to fish. And a lot of that was because of the monofilament netting.
When did the monofilament start?
I would say early 60s.
Early 60s. Yeah.
Yep.
Why did that make such a difference? The monofilament.
Fish couldn't see it in the daytime.
Oh, okay.
They can't see it.
Yeah, it's clear.
And at night they can't see it at all.
Yeah.
But in the daytime, it blended right in with the water. It was a real game changer.
Yeah.
It really was.
Yeah.
And it didn't catch trash near as bad because it was a solid material, whereas nylon is woven and it hangs up oysters. And
Okay.
you could strike a nylon net around oysters and get loaded up, and have a mess. But with a monofilament, you just shook them out. It was a real game changer.
Yeah.
Yep.
Interesting.
Like I said, and then along come fishermen that really weren't fishermen yet.
Yeah.
We had a large influx as it grew. And then when the price of roe mullet went up, we had a very large influx during that season. And that's where a lot of the bad reputation came in.
So was there some bad blood during that time? Were people pretty angry about these?
Well, the people that were angry were the recreational sector, because so many of these guys came in that weren't full-time commercial fishermen, and they really didn't care about the resource. They didn't care who they affected by their behavior. And they would go up in the canals and at night, and it upset people, and it started a very bad rapport, and then the smear campaign started on us. A lot of false information.
Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Well, they compared our fishery, our gill net fishery, with, for instance, the miles and miles of drift net that the offshore fleet uses in the Pacific and places like that. Things killing birds and wildlife and unwanted fish, and they compared us to that, which was nothing like it. Accused us of killing all these turtles and everything. And I can tell you, in all my years of fishing, I ain't never caught a turtle in a gill net. Ain't no way.
When you say they, who was the they anyway?
Well, they is the group that formulated this plan to get rid of us.
Yeah, but who were they anyway?
They came up from the recreational sector.
Okay.
And it
was like a lobby or something?
Yeah. But the misinformation was just unbelievable.
Yeah. That's what I mean.
And none of it was from actual true life experience for us. It hurt us really bad.
Yeah.
It wasn't right.
And what did the local fishermen, the guys that were full-time like yourself, what did you do about it? Was there anything?
Well, we fought it. We put up as much good information as we had, but we were told to start with at one of the meetings that if it ever went to a vote for an amendment, that we would surely lose. And that statement was made by the state legislature committee that was overseeing things.
This was all at the state level, not at the county level.
This is all at the state level.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
Was there anybody any law organizations or anything legal?
Well, there was Organized Fishermen of Florida.
Yeah, but I mean on your side.
No.
No.
Not that I know of.
Yeah.
Not that I know of.
Yeah.
It was a real smear campaign. That's when I started devoting more time to learning to fish offshore. And I had already built my first shrimp boat because I love to shrimp right here in the bay. And I even took that little boat and went to a few times. I went to Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, spent a summer out there shrimping. Then I'd come home, and that was tough, leaving the family. And
yeah,
I was so glad when she got a good job. I didn't go anymore. I stayed home. I said, finally, I can afford it.
That's great.
But I started fishing offshore more, and I sold that little boat.
That was right around the time of the ban. You started doing it.
Yeah, just pretty close to it. That was I sold that little boat, and I built another one. I bought a fiberglass hull, and it was 31 foot. I finished it, and I used it offshore and shrimping. Then I got a 34-foot one and used it offshore and shrimping. And then I got a 41-foot one, and I said, I'm done. No more after this, And so right now I'm just strictly fishing offshore.
Can you tell us a little bit about shrimping? I don't know much about it.
Shrimping is, here it's at night.
Okay.
You know, there have been occasions where we had a couple of years where we caught shrimp in the daytime, but we would shrimp at night and then we'd sell them right here. You know, retail them right at home because you had a good fresh product, no preservatives, you know, and I have a rig that goes on the boat and you tow trawl doors and a shrimp net.
Okay.
Yep.
And it's just a finer mesh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a small mash.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's only 1 5/8 stretched across.
Is it like a purse seine net?
No, it's shaped like a funnel.
Okay.
Yeah, your trawl doors go down and take it down and pull it apart. And you're dragging it along about 2.5 knots. And the shrimp are going in it and they go all the way down in the far end of it, which is what we call the cod end. And then when you reel the doors back up to the stern of the boat, and you got a line that brings that cod end up to the side of the boat, and you lift that up and dump it on the table, and you dump the shrimp out of that, then you throw the whole thing back and do the process again.
The cod end opens to let the
Yeah, it's
shrimp
got a zip tie like a purse.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's what they call a purse seine net, I think, in New
Well, a
England.
purse seine is a big piece of equipment.
Right.
Big heavy net. They put it all the way around the fish, and it's got a line under that with loops in it that actually pulls the bottom together like a purse. And that's why it's called purse seine. The top is open, and then they got that up beside the boat, and they take a huge vacuum now, and they just suck all the fish out of the water that's in the purse seine. They go into the hole. Yep. Used to, they had to bail them out.
Oh.
You know, with a giant dip net.
Yeah.
Now they got a vacuum about that big around. It was, but that put a dent. The net band put a dent in that too.
Oh.
Yeah, because they can't be in state waters. You know, so there's a lot of species they used to catch in state waters with the purse seine. They can't do that now.
Yeah.
No.
So, was the fishing community around here, were people pretty good friends?
Oh, gosh, yeah.
Everybody
Oh, yeah.
helped each other out.
Yeah, this was a different time of life. I mean, if you wanted, a common thing to do would be to throw the kids in the car and go visit so-and-so. You know, let's go be social, you know, and things like that. And anybody got sick, I mean, you know, the whole community would come together. It was a different world.
Yeah.
It was a more caring, thoughtful world. You know, your fellow man meant something to you, you know, even if it was a fisherman nobody liked. Because there might have been a couple of those thrown around, you know, but I think back, and it's when they did the net ban, it was really sad, because some of the older fishermen at that time, that was their life. That was what they lived for. And I can understand it completely, because, I mean, knowing that you're going to get up that morning and go down there and get in that boat and fire that thing up and go fishing is one of the best feelings you could ever have if you're a fisherman.
Yeah.
You know? And when they pull that rug out from under them, there's no doubt in my mind that some of them suffered a premature death. No doubt about it.
Yeah.
No doubt.
Yeah.
A couple of them committed suicide.
I've heard that.
Yep.
I've heard that. Yeah.
Right.
How on another slightly different topic, how have you seen the marine environment change?
Goes right downhill.
Yeah.
Right downhill. Every year's worse.
And what do you attribute that to?
I think the biggest thing is the absolute pollution, the runoff we have from the sheer population of people we have anymore. and everything's deforested. There's no water retention. You know, everything is asphalt and concrete now. And, you know, and everybody wants their little piece of the pie. And you just look around, there's nowhere for the water to be contained. Yeah. It's got to run in the ditch and it's got to run into the bay.
Yeah.
It's, I mean, there's things out here that there used to be thousands of that you can't even find one now. Things that were like horseshoe crabs. I mean, a prehistoric creature, and you can't even find one now. You know, they used to crawl in droves up there on the boat ramp in Pineland.
Is that right?
Yeah, when people wanted to launch their boat, they had to go down there and move the crabs out of the way. That's true. Yep. And you talk about something to get tangled up in a net. When he gets in that net and he gets all them legs going, it's like he wants to get as much net bundled up as he can. And they're terrible to get out. There's places we wouldn't even fish at night down in the islands because they were so bad. Now you can't even find one.
Yeah.
Yep. And birds, oh my gosh. We used to have so many birds. Yep. Oh, Mother Earth is taking a beating. Ain't no doubt about it.
Yep.
Yep. We used to have the fish. People don't believe you when you tell them how many fish they were. I used to run aground on redfish. I would, at night, when you couldn't see, you know, and you get up in the shallow waters, that's the other thing too. A kicker boat enabled you to run in much shallower water because as it moved along, the bow come up, you know, and I'd have to shut the motor down. You'd run into a school of redfish, you know, and you'd be chomp, chomp, chomp. You'd have to stop. Yeah. And the trout so thick, and mullet, there was no end to the world of mullet.
Yeah.
No end at all. And so, now it's pitiful.
Yeah. The state said that you were depleting the quantities of fish.
No.
Right? But isn't that what they claimed? I mean,
oh sure.
Yeah.
But it was so, and I'm sure that the recreational sector had the attitude that we get rid of these guys, there's going to be so many fish. It has just gotten worse all the time, you know, and you can't make them believe that you were doing good because when you put that net around in most of the waters around here and you pull on that net, the lead line pulls across the bottom and stirs that stuff up where it can get loose and leave, you know, otherwise it's stagnant. You know, and when you would put that net around a bunch of mullet that in the fall of the year that were ready to spawn, they were spawning right there. They were all excited in that net, and there was roe everywhere. Those fish spawned right there. They didn't have to wait till they got to the Gulf, you know, and now they're pollution is so bad and the red tide, and never in all the years of growing up here, anytime we had a red tide event, it was an event, then it was over. Never did I ever see it kill a porpoise, you know, or a turtle, or birds, manatees. Never did it kill. There's something different entirely. It's poison. You know, it's not just red tide, it's poison.
Yep.
Yep.
I believe it. Yeah.
Because I've seen one year red tide went all the way up the Caloosahatchee River. Dead fish everywhere. You know, but nothing, no big thing like that. And in 2 months, it was like it never happened. And there was still plenty of fish. You know, but it takes, from what I understand, it takes 3 years to recover from one of these events. So if you have something else happen within those 3 years, then you're set back 6 or 7 years. You know, and the way things are moving, it ain't never gonna happen. Not in my lifetime.
Yeah. Is there anything else you'd?
Not much of anything. You know, you can. It's sad to look back at what we had.
I'm hearing that.
And see what we have now.
Yeah.
You know, and it's sad to see what some people do. How some people just have no regard or respect for what they're doing. And it's amazing we don't have more boat accidents than what we have, because most of these people don't know what they're doing when they get in a boat.
I hear it. I see it.
It's horrible.
Yeah.
I was a volunteer firefighter on Pine Island for 18 years. And the last several years I was an ambulance driver to go along with that. And then we started phasing in paid people, and we sold the ambulance to the county, and finally I got out of it because I wasn't really needed, and other things were going on. So, but the island has changed so much. It's, everybody wants their little piece of pie, you know, and this thing with the bridge is stretched it to the limit, I tell you. And these, I'm sorry, you're complaining. You just got here.
Well, thanks a lot, Steve. This was great.
You bet.
This was really great. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
That was really good.
Turtle roast.
Yeah.
And, well, again, it's just what we needed.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's all there was to it. And conch.
Yeah.
Well, we ate a lot of conch.
There's no conch around anymore, are there?
No,
I don't see any.
There never was that particular kind here that they have down in the Bahamas and stuff. All we have here are just common whelk
yeah.
type
Yeah,
conchs.
yeah. That's what we have in New England, and a lot of the guys, I don't know about a lot of the guys, but some of the guys that used to lobster got into that, because the lobster, you know, the lobster's dead where we are in Connecticut. It's all, you know, the water's too warm. There's no more. There's a couple of guys, but they aren't making a living doing it.
No.
I mean, it used to be lobster pots everywhere.
Yeah,
They're
right.
all gone. They're all gone.
Well, that's one reason I left the Keys after we got married. I was lobster fishing there. That was a whole nother different episode. But then I was making a living with 300 traps, and her dad was helping me. That's what he was doing. And then the guys started running pot, and they were buying a lot more traps. They were buying a second boat, and it was to the point where you either joined the group or they would say something to you, and your butt would be in trouble one way or the other, because then you'd be guilty of conspiracy. So
was that in the Keys? Or?
In Marathon.
Yeah.
So we just upped and left. We moved back to Pine Island. Back in '73. 74.
Yeah.
I said that's no, I ain't doing it.
Yeah.
That's what we did. I wanted to move back to Pine Island anyways. I wanted to go back fishing.
Yeah.
The net fishing down in the Keys was big fishing. I mean, you know, you'd go after mackerel and you'd come back with 20,000 pounds. and then you got to deal with them. And back in them days, you had to gut them too. After you got them out of the net, you had to gut them.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
Man.
it was grueling.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
When you were shrimping, did you have a stern man with you, or did you?
No,
No, you did it
almost
alone.
all by myself.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow.
I set the boat up that way.
Yeah. And how
By
about when you were
myself.
mullet fishing? Was it the same?
Yeah.
Same,
Yep.
yeah.
By myself. Yep.
Yep. Amazing.
And same
A lot
way.
of work.
Same way fishing offshore. This is the first year I've actually taken somebody with me. Most of the time it was by myself, but it's safer to take somebody with
Oh, for
me.
sure. For sure.
So that's what I've been doing.
Yeah.
And this thing ain't no need to take her because she won't be of any help, as you can see.
So she stays home?
Yeah. Well, if I'm going to be gone 3 or 4 days, I take her to my daughter.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
In all of your years, did you ever have any close calls, anything that was life-threatening, or
Oh, yeah.
like what?
Well, one night I got my shirt caught in a winch, my flannel shirt, and I couldn't reach the lever to turn the damn thing off. I had my right arm caught in the cat head that had a bolt sticking out of it, and I couldn't reach over it far enough to throw the thing, shut it off. Fortunately, it just kept ripping my shirt off. And the very next day, I cut that bolt off where it would never be a problem again. You know, but there's been some thunderstorms out there that were pretty darn scary.
Yeah.
I don't like that thunder and lightning.
Yeah.
And when it's so close that the thunder and lightning are at the same time,
Yeah, you know it's on.
you know, and the whole boat shakes, it's it's no fun. It's scary.
Sure.
Usually they don't last very long, but they last just long enough to keep you awake, I tell you that. And I had one good friend of mine, lightning hit his boat and it destroyed everything. You know, all his electronics and everything.
Was he on board?
Yeah.
Wow.
Said he had was sitting in his seat and just took his feet off his stainless steering wheel. He said they saw that steering wheel light up even, you know, but I generally unplug everything when I know it's going to get bad. But I don't know. Try and save the electronics. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I have saved a couple of people out there, you know, actually kept them from sinking. And one time I was coming in and I was coming in because the weather was so lousy. I said, I ain't staying out there in this. And a plane come down and circled over me. I was coming this way, and then he went back to the north a little ways, and then he come back and he circled over me again, and then he dipped, you know, and I said, something's going on.
Yeah.
And I turned the radio on 16, and he called me and told me there was a boat 1.5 miles north of me that was sinking. See if I could go get the guys. And I did. It was a pretty good sized boat, but it was one of those that was almost all bow cap. And there was one guy bailing with a 5-gallon bucket, and the other guy was standing on the bow cap, holding the VHF radio under his arm and holding the mic up like that. I came up to him, and they had an anchor out, but it was just a toy. You know, and I came up to him and I said, pull that anchor in. Take the anchor off. I said, I'm going to come around and I was by myself. When I go to the stern of my boat, throw me that anchor line and you ain't going to get but one chance. And I'll cleat it off and tow them into the wind. And that's what happened. I towed them all the way to Boca Grande. And when we got to Boca Grande, I towed them into the marina there. And the one guy come up to me and he said, here, this is all the money I got. I told my buddy, if he saves our ass, I'm giving him every bit of money I got in my pocket. And he gave me $42.
Jeez, thanks.
But then the guy that owned the boat, he had called his wife, I guess, and she come down there and he wrote me a check for $400.
That's more like it, yeah.
And when I left, the Coast Guard was all over them. You know, but they were scared. They really were.
I bet. Would they get a hole in the boat or what?
It was too rough, and the seas were slapping and coming over into the boat because the anchor wouldn't hold. The anchor was actually causing them more problems than if they had just, because it was holding the boat at an angle, and the seas were hitting over the side of the boat. You know, if the anchor had been holding, it'd have been straight into the wind. Yeah. But that was the only day they could go fishing that week. Yeah. And another time, though, short story, my neighbor that used to live over here, I took him and his friend that used to live over there and a couple other friends out that were from New York. Just took them out for the day fishing. And it was nasty. And the old guy that was over here, he was standing in front of me. Where you walk down into the forward cabin, he was standing on the steps to go down there with his arms up on the console like this. And I told him, I said, Harry, that's not a good place to stand. I said, I'm coming around into the seas. I said, you need to be somewhere steadier, you know. And he said, oh, no, I'm all right. And the boat come up like this. And when it went down, he braced himself like this, but he couldn't hold himself. And his weight was up here, and then it went down. And he had an old-fashioned pin in his hip. And it was the kind that was like a door latch. And when his legs stretched, it pulled it out, and when it come back down, it missed the little hole and went out like this. And so we had to go in, and it was a rough ride getting in, and the youngest guy was a state trooper from New York. And he kept him from going into shock. And that was terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds pretty scary.
And the old guy was a retired IRS agent. And my buddy that lived here, he told him, he says, don't even think about trying to sue Steve. He says, if you even think about trying to sue him, he says, I'll make sure you don't live when you get to the dock. Wasn't my fault. You know, but I don't carry liability.
Yeah.
Can't afford it. You know, it's... The old guy was miserable, though. He was hurting. And it's because those two guys from New York, when we got out there and the weather turned crappy, I looked at both of them. I said, because I knew they brought a lunch, I said, you didn't bring no bananas, right?
No bananas.
Yeah, we got bananas. I said, well, you better get rid of them right now. And they each had a banana and they ate it, you know. And I said, well, that's probably not going to work, but at least they're out of sight.
Explain to Steve what the deal is with bananas.
It's bad luck. Take bananas on a boat. You know, it's bad luck. Take bananas and talk about gators.
I wonder how that started.
Alligators.
I wonder how the banana thing started. I've heard that.
Probably some old fisherman slipped on a banana peel. Who knows? Yeah.